All right, looks like we're going to stay in the NBA. What are we doing?
Let's do it. Let's stay in the NBA. We've spent a lot of time talking Nets and Lakers.
Yeah.
But they're both fighting for the play-in spot.
Yeah, they're actually both terrible.
Yeah.
They're actually both bad basketball teams. The Lakers are worse, but the Nets are the Nets are sometimes unwatchable as well. But what?
Okay.
Hold on, go ahead. No, you can.
That was a super A, man.
What?
Kyrie, I mean, KD's definitely done a better job at picking his team. It's not. Let's move on.
Okay, that's fine.
You know, while the Suns, Grizzlies, Heat, and Celtics sit atop of the conference.
Yep.
Is building super teams no longer the way to win in the NBA?
So here's the thing. I don't know that building super teams was ever the exact way to win. There was a level of, well, if if LeBron's got a super team, then I have to have a super team to combat that. But the way to win in the NBA has been incredibly consistent for, the better part of 40 years. You must have an apex top 5 player in the league at a minimum. And then you fill in the surrounding holes. So if we just think about the champions, why did the Bucks win? Were the Bucks a super team? No, they were organically built for the most part, despite the Drew Holiday trade. But they had Giannis at the peak of his powers. The year before, the Lakers, was that a super team? I would argue no. It was 2 great players, but they were acquired in free agency and via trade in LeBron and AD. But you had LeBron at the peak or close to the peak of his powers. The year before, it was Kawhi, again, a guy who at the moment was top 5 guy at the peak of his powers. When it felt like you had to have a super team was when a team such as the Warriors that was a champion already then added an MVP in Kevin Durant. Then it felt like, oh my God, how can anyone beat them? But it should be noted, the team that came the closest to beating them, the only team to take those Warriors with KD, a healthy Warriors with KD, past 5 games, was a Rockets team that, yes, they had added Chris Paul, but what they had was at the time James Harden, who was a league MVP, top 5 guy at the peak of his powers. So if you don't have one of those guys, then you must find a way to add as many, players 6 to 15 as possible, but that's probably not getting it done. So I've always thought it was a misnomer of, you must have a super team. You must have a pantheon guy, a guy that's going to be a no doubt inclusion on my top 50 players the last 50 years list when that comes out next month. Little plug within the podcast for a future part of the podcast. That's what you've got to have, and then you have to fill out the roster smartly surrounding it. But you mentioned 4 teams there. You mentioned the Grizzlies, the Suns, the Bucks, and the Heat. There's only, to me, there's one team there that I feel like nobody doubts can win the title, and that's the Bucks. Why? Because they have a top 5 guy at the peak of his powers. The Suns have had an unbelievable regular season. They're going to win 60-plus games. A lot of people believe they're going to win the title. For them to do so, it would be somewhat unprecedented because Booker, as good as he is nowhere close to a top 5 guy in the league. And Chris Paul, as historically great as he's been, he's not there yet anymore. And the Grizzlies, I love them, but they're drawing dead to win the title. The Heat are drawing dead to win the title. You've got to have one of those guys. That's what NBA history tells us. And I'm going to fail against the clock again. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to get more from the show and make sure to click the bell to get notified every time new content drops. Check out full episodes of What's Right wherever you get your podcasts, or just click the link in the description below.